Hey all, welcome to another video. Today I wanted to explain absolute and relative positioning in CSS. A lot of people have a lot of trouble understanding the difference between the two and how to get their elements to do what they want them to do. How to get their elements positioned the way they should be positioned. Um, so yeah, we're going to explain that. So there's 5 position types in CSS. We're going to explain 3 of them here. These are the 3 that I feel are the most important when it comes to understanding relative and absolute positioning. So the first one is static positioning. So most HTML elements are static by default. They're block level elements, meaning that they stack on top of each other, one right after each other. Some HTML elements are inline, but for divs are block level. So yeah, they usually fall in a column, one right after another. They're also not affected by the top, bottom, left, and right properties. So if you have a div that's static and you put just random top 30 pixels, it's not going to respond to that. So the next one is relative positioning. Relative is a relatively positioned element is positioned relative to its normal position. That means that it's in place, kind of like a static element, but it can be affected by the top, bottom, left, and right properties. So if you have a div that is positioned relative and you put in top 30 pixels, whatever, it will come down 30 pixels. Think of it like a train on a track. A static element is the train on the track, but if you put relative, you're taking the train off of the track. So it can be moved anywhere, although it is in its position. I hope that makes sense. Relative positioning also acts as a reference for any absolute positioned elements around it. And I'm going to explain that here in a bit. So absolutely positioned elements are positioned relative to their nearest ancestor. I know that makes no sense. That's what's so hard to grasp about these concepts, but I'm definitely going to show you here in a minute. So if you have an element on a page that's by itself and it's positioned absolutely, it's going to go to the top left corner. It's going to position itself default to the document body. But if you have an element that is positioned relative, and then you have an element that's positioned absolutely, absolute, it's going to go off of the element that is positioned relative. Please don't let that confuse you because I'm going to show you. So there's 2 more position types that we won't go into with this video. One is fixed, and that just means that it stays where it's at. No matter even if you're scrolling, it just kind of stays in that position in the viewport. And then there's sticky, which is a little bit harder to explain, but like I said, we're not going to get into those right now. We'll get into it probably in another video. Alright, so let's go into our CodePen so I can actually show you. So here we are in CodePen. So we have a parent div, which is the green. I'm sorry, that's totally blue. And then we have the child div, which is the green one. Then we have paragraph element, which is here, and we have another paragraph on the bottom. So since nothing is positioned, everything is set as a block level element, and they go one right after another because that's how they are here. You got your text, and then you have your div, and then you have more text. Everything is in line and kind of in flow with each other. So if we set the child to right now the child is inside the parent because that's the way that we set it up here. See, the parent is outside and the child is inside right here. So if we set the child to position absolute, that pulls it out of the flow of things. Did you notice that the parent or the paragraph element below it disappeared? It didn't go anywhere. It just, because we pulled the child out of the normal flow of things, it is now right under where it says some text here, but it's behind the the, um, the child div. So the child stays in place, but it's pulled out of the natural flow of things. So it's kind of, it's almost like it's not in there, not in the natural flow of things, but it is. So this we can move around. Before we couldn't move it around because it was static. So now that we have added position absolute to it, we can move it. We can say top 20 pixels, which is already 20 pixels. Go 50 pixels. So right now, since this child is absolute, it's going off of the body. It's set right now relative to the body. So it's 20 pixels from the top, and then we'll go, or 50 pixels from the top. And now we're 20 pixels from the left. So here's 50 pixels right here, and here's 20 pixels. So when you set something absolute and it can't find a parent that is set relative, it will automatically set itself relative to the body. I hope that makes sense. So what if we wanted to, so if we come up here and we set this is the parent div. If we set position to relative, the child div is now set relative to the parent div because we set this to relative. So we can set the height to wait, that's the parent. Hold on a second. So if we take the height and width off and we set, let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of this. And instead of setting a height and a width, what we can do is set the top to 0 pixels, the bottom to 0 pixels, the left to, let's say, 20%, and the right to 20%. And what will happen is, right now the top is 0 pixels away from the top of its parent, because this is, remember, this is set to absolute, this is set to relative. So it is set 0 pixels from the bottom. It is set 20% from the left side and 20% from the right side. So if we got rid of this, do you see how it gets back? It gets set back to where it's relative to the body. On an element that's set absolute, it's going to look for a parent that is set to relative, and if it doesn't find a parent that is set to relative, then it'll set itself to the body. So if we wanted to put it back, we just make that relative, and it goes back into there. So I hope that makes sense, guys. If it did, hit the like button. If it didn't, let me know down below. If I get enough people that say it didn't make sense, then I'll definitely redo it. But in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell because a lot more tutorials are coming. I really want to help out newer devs, or devs that have been coding for a while but may have missed some simple concepts. Um, it happens, especially with self-taught developers. So definitely stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.